If it's Thursday, must be another episode of No Vacancy Live. Anthony, great to see you.
Remind me to tell you about, do you think or do you know? Remind me to tell you a story.
All right. Do you think or do you know that I'll remember that?
I'm Anthony. Welcome to No Vacancy Live. That's my friend Glenn.
You're watching the #1 show in hospitality. Hey everybody, welcome back to another fun-filled episode of No Vacancy Live with Anthony Melchiori and me, Glenn Hausman. And yes, I know it's going to be a mighty fine show. How are you doing today?
Good. You want to hear the story real quick?
Oh, your sound is a little vibraty there. Try again.
Do you want to hear the story?
There we go. Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. I was at a hotel in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm doing the show Hotel Impossible, and there was a bellman that had a soda on the bell desk outside where everybody went to get their tickets for their cars. Mm-hmm. And I said, do you really think a soda is a good idea to have on the desk? I guess shouldn't see that. Right. And he goes, well, you're the expert. Do you think I shouldn't have it? Or do you know I shouldn't have it? And my director, he was under crunch time and he wouldn't let me go at him because he's like, hey, we got to go over here. To this day, that's the only scene that I didn't force myself to go back and get because right. I was gonna store that Coke somewhere, but it wasn't gonna be on the desk.
Yeah, we would have needed a parental warning on that episode.
Yeah, if you see the show, it's I think it's second or third season. He says it on camera. He goes, "Do you think
right
or do you know?" And I was like, "Oh, I know what I want to do." Anyway,
that's hysterical. Well, one thing that I think, and I'm pretty sure I know, is that people love the great outdoors. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Yes, we are actually dedicating the entire show to talking about the eponymous 80s film with John Candy and Dan Aykroyd. Wait, no, we're not. We're actually talking about the great outdoors. I thought I was going to have to eat a 96-ounce steak. People born in the 70s.
That if you were in the Comedy Cellar here in New York.
You don't know that movie?
I do, but that wouldn't have landed.
You're killing me. All right.
That wouldn't have landed.
All right, well, let's just move on. We got Mr. Todd Wynne-Parry. Of course, he's managing director with Horwath, focusing on the outdoor life. And you definitely look like you live the outdoor life, man. How are you?
Very good. I do. That's part of my attraction to the sector.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I just want to tell everybody, what I love about doing the show and being on LinkedIn every day is that sometimes people just reach out to me and say, hey, let me come on the show. And then boom, we get you right on the show. So thanks for reaching out with the topic that I've been really wanting to dive into a lot more deeply. And it's this whole phenomenon with the great outdoors and people wanting to spend more of their vacation and leisure time in an outdoor setting. Now, Todd, just to set the stage for everybody, obviously this has been around for a long time, but like with so many other things, the pandemic really seemed to accelerate the trend. And now people are watching it for not just having a good time, but seeing it as a serious investment opportunity. So how are you seeing overall the state of that side of the business?
Yeah, no, that's a great intro. The pandemic did put some wind in the sails in the sector, but it was truly growing and brands were emerging several years before that in the more, institutional glamping sort of sector where a lot of money was going into the assets and stuff like that. The initial part of the pandemic, it was a bit of a blow to it because people obviously had to lock down, couldn't do anything. But then once that lifted and people could get out, the back half of 2020 was a huge year for the sector. And then 2021 was a huge boom. They thought 22, they were going to have to back off on their projections. And then Omicron came and 2022 was a big year. So it definitely helped it, but it was already moving along. And my interest in it was a couple of years before that occurrance.
So Todd, tell us about your company and how you got interested in this.
Sure. So right after I was with Commune Hotels and Resorts, and we sold all those brands. Two Roads Hospitality sold all to Hyatt, and I was kind of looking for the next thing I was going to do. And at the time, I was consulting to a brand called AutoCamp, which was a startup that does Airstream-based sort of glamping campgrounds around the country. And I was helping them how to grow strategically. And they eventually said, "Can you just join?" And so I did. But what I wanted to do is really understand the sector and the playground that they were working in, as opposed to just that particular brand or that niche that they were in. And the more I studied this sector, I was just amazed at where the demographics were, the infancy of the sector in terms of real institutional money getting into it was still very young. And so now what I did was I moved all that information after the pandemic came, and I moved on to just doing my own consulting independently. And so now I work with site owners and what they're doing and trying to help them with their market feasibility study or site analysis. And I work with the brands, either strategically getting them to align how they're going to grow and scale, and or tactically, literally finding spots for them. And then I work with the investors that either want to invest at a platform level or in a specific property.
So where is it, as far as if you take it from a brand standpoint and you take it from 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, where is the sweet spot? One, where are guests looking really? And two, where's the money? Is the money in the lower end or is the money in the higher end?
The quick answer is sort of in the middle to the top, the upper side of it. The sweet spot seems to be in that $250 to $450 average room rate. There's kind of a lot of room to grow in there. And the reason for that is because the investment in the assets is actually a little more expensive than you think. Throwing a safari tent up or a trailer or a tiny house or something like that, it can be it's a lot more expensive than people think, and it's inching up towards the cost of a normal hotel room. And in some instances, it's even more than that. If you look at the high end, Amangiri, their Camp Sarika, those are $1 million tents that they've got out there that they sell for about $4,000 a night. The safari tents at the resort at Paws Up in Montana, again, $2,000 a night.
Are these the types of tents that you would see in like an Indiana Jones film where you it's like huge and you got the guy behind the desk doing work because it's got all that space?
Yeah, the ones at Camp Sarika, and to a lesser extent, the ones at the new resort down in Punta Mita at the Four Seasons in Naviva. I mean, they're large sort of safari tents with ensuite bathrooms and plenty of living space, indoor and outdoor living space. Sometimes a deck to hang out on, and then a fireplace as well. So lots of living space, and that's one of the advantages that you have.
Okay, so the most important question is, where do you use the restroom? That's probably the infrastructure of I would imagine, not screwing up what's out there because you want to be as natural as possible. But also, if I'm paying $500 a night, I really don't want to go behind the tree.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And to be clear, the accommodation style varies greatly, but it all becomes some similarities. It's in a natural setting. It's a place where people want to go to enjoy nature. But there's probably a detached unit. You're not in a room block. So then you get down to, is it a tent? Is it a trailer? Is it a tiny house? Is it a cabin? And to be honest with you, there's all different products out there and the price points vary between them all. But to your point around the restroom issue, that's a huge one. Some people, some developers are doing tents that have, or accommodations that all of them have ensuite. Others, they have some that don't have an ensuite with a bathhouse, a beautiful bathhouse, indoor, outdoor showers, spa facilities. And then some of the units in there will or will not have the ensuite. So it's a variety right now.
Okay. When I went with my friend Craig Morgan, who's an outdoorsman, Nick, he was an Army Ranger and he's a famous singer, country singer, into Alaska bass fishing for one of my shows. He handed me a gun because apparently in the place we were, you could not fish unless you had a gun because there were bears all around us. Any places that come with a gun?
Not that I know of.
I'm sure there's a lot of places people come with the guns. But Todd, I got a question. The place that's behind me today.
Yeah.
What kind of price range is that? Is that in the upper middle that you're talking about, or is that more of a luxury type of setup?
It can be. It can be kind of both, to be honest with you. Depends
Depending
on
the fixtures and
what the other amenities are, your location.
Ensuite,
if you're in a top premier location, it's going to be luxury pricing. That's for sure. You'll notice in that picture that there's an over tent that goes to it, and the technology in these tents and a lot of the structures right now is amazing. So that's going to be a fire retardant and obviously rainproof over tent that allows to have a really lovely feeling inside the actual tent while providing great protection from the elements over the top.
Yeah, I noticed that over tent. That's I haven't seen that before.
Yeah.
It also allows some air flow through because canvas it breathes a little bit, and inside a canvas, as you might have tented before, been in a tent before in your life, all your humidity from your body can accumulate on the roof. So if you have that over tent, you can allow that humidity to go out, and you don't have the moisture in the tent at the end of the night.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So just to describe for people that are listening to the audio feed, it's a beautiful tent that's against the river. It looks, or on a lake. It looks to me that there's possibly a balcony on that tent in the back. Then the front, there's a lovely couple sitting in Adirondack style chairs, little patio, fire pit, and outdoor bathtub as well, all surrounded by lovely walls made out of looks like wood beams and stuff.
Do you partner with national parks?
So we typically work with gateway communities, sites that are in gateway communities. The national parks, they have a couple of different approaches to how they deal with it, whether it's a concession or it's a lease or whatever. And I haven't really worked with them directly, but I've worked in Mariposa, gateway to Yosemite, and recently I was in Terlingua, the gateway to Big Bend National Park down in Texas. The national parks, obviously, those are the big draws, right? That's a huge demand driver with millions of visitors every year. So if you've got a site within a half hour to 45 minute drive from a gate to a national park, obviously that's a great demand driver for you.
I'm near Gateway National Park, which is in New York, and they have something very basic where you can rent some tents, and you're seeing the skyline of New York, and you're in a national park, and it's absolutely incredible. Wow. And like tents like this, because you have New York, and we have a hotel out my neighborhood, which is 45 minutes from a ferry from New York, and they're getting $700,000-800,000 a night for a hotel room. 45 minutes from New York on the water. So something like this would be unbelievable in that park.
Well, there is one on Governor's Island. The Collective Retreats have a small resort on Governor's Island that looks out to the Statue of Liberty and over to the lower Manhattan. And yeah, that's the pricing. They also lean directly into the food and beverage scene as well. So they've got a top chef out there making amazing meals.
I've never heard of it.
It's a really great getaway. Yeah, it's called Collective Retreats. It's on Governor's Island. Short ferry ride over there. And the food and beverage is amazing, and it's open to the public, so you don't have to be staying at the property to eat there, which is really great. Also, an amazing setting with a deck overlooking Manhattan, and they've really made a progression through. They've got some great hard-sided units with a bathtub and a on the end of the unit that looks out over to Manhattan and the Statue of Liberty as well. And they have some amazing safari tents. It's a great operation. Yeah, they've got about 4 or 5 properties around the country. Wow. One of my clients are doing great work. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. We're looking.
So tell your client we should do the podcast live from there. Sorry, Glenn.
No, that's a great idea. We've done it from a lodge upstate in New York, so it would be fun to do it from one of these types of facilities as well. That's for sure. So let me ask you. We're looking at a property here in Utah, and it gets me thinking. We've been talking about the glamping, and you had mentioned at the beginning all the different versions of this. We don't have really a vocabulary yet to talk about it. So how are you differentiating right now between this tented concept, regular RV parks that might have some sort of tents to it, and now there's I think more of a blending between the outdoors and the indoors, with Starwood Capital announcing the Field and Stream hotels, which if you look at the artwork is going to looks like traditional hotel rooms, but it's also outdoors focused, et cetera, et cetera. I think I could go on and on, with all that kind of stuff. So how are you creating that language, and what are some of the things that we should know in that regard?
Yeah, that's great. It's a great question. So the playground I work in, or the field I work in, the forest I live in, I suppose, is really from those hybrid RV parks that have plenty of RV sites, but they'll also have accommodation. Might be a tiny house, might be a tent, maybe some vintage trailers or something like that they provide as accommodation, all the way over to those higher end, several $1,000s a night glamping experiences or outdoor experiences that you get.
Yeah.
So that's the playground, and it's really
Hey,
hard.
hold on one second for Todd. For the people
Yeah.
watching, we're looking
Yeah.
at that Governor's Island imagery right now.
Yeah.
The property they were just talking about. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, no problem. So in between all of that, there are a bunch of words that have been thrown around, whether it's glamping or outdoor hospitality. Alternative accommodation really works as well. And there are sub niches that are being developed in there. So there's some like the hybrid RV park that you get that might have 30 or 40 or 60. There's one in Moab. It's got the KOA there. It's got 60 plus cabins. And I tell them, don't sell that like a RV space. You're competing with the local hotel market. So your pricing should mirror whatever people are getting in town for a hotel, because that's really what you're selling. It's actually better because it's a detached unit, a lot of privacy. And so there's that. And then as you mentioned, Field and Stream came out. They're sort of the third or fourth generation of that. There was a original one came out in Tahoe, Lake Tahoe, South Lake Tahoe, called Base Camp. The concept being take an old motel and really aim it towards that millennial, Gen Z, outdoorsy, mountain biker, snowboarder crowd in everything that you do, in the cosmetics, in how you set up a map room in the lobby. All of these things are aimed towards that generation and towards those people being very active. Then Lodge Hotels, LOGE, came out and they upped it. And they said, not only are we going to do that, we're going to throw in Yeti coolers and Eno hammocks and all of the things in the rooms. You can use those. You can take them out. You can thrash them. You can do whatever you want. Put it back in the room. All good. Or just take it and we'll honor bar it. We'll charge your room and you can have that great equipment. So they've appealed to the brands that people are buying that are staying in hotels. And also they took it another level and they said, we're going to rent that equipment. So they rent mountain bikes or snowboards or whatever right from their front lobby. They've got about 6 properties and a bunch underway. That's a great brand. Then obviously Barry Sternlick, who's already been in the sector in a couple of different places. He came in with AJ Capital to do the Field and Stream brand, which is, again, take that old hotel motel stock in a great place and add a lot of CapEx to it, turn it towards this sector, and it's a great formula. People love it. They really love it.
Quick show note to people about AJ Capital. They're known for doing graduate hotels, and they've also started marine and lawn hotels, which is kind of reinventing the whole golf club hotel kind of vibe. So now they've reinvented campus properties. They're working on outdoors and the golfing. Interesting strategy for them.
And you know, about 6 years ago, we did a hotel in Alaska, and we took an old hotel and we made a mud room. We made a place to put your gear, your fishing gear, your hunting gear. We took out the carpet and we made it, again, it's a regular motel, but we made it comfortable because, you know, people don't want to live with their fishing gear and hunting gear and muddy boots in their room. So again, it doesn't have to be a 5-star hotel, but it has to be thoughtful. We tried to upgrade the food. So it was very, very popular place. And hopefully they turned it around and they did well. When we left them the template for it. But I didn't even know where the mud room was until Craig Morgan. I called him up and go, hey, man, I need you to come to Alaska. And we're doing the hotel. He goes, do we have a mud room? I said, no, but that's why you're coming, because I have no idea what the hell a mud room is. I'm from Brooklyn. But no, so how about tree houses? Have you done any consulting with tree houses?
I pitched actually on some work down in South Carolina. A guy wanted to do 160, or sorry, North Carolina. He wanted to do 160 of them. But there's a great example in Skamania Resort, just on southern Washington, right across the river, Columbia River from Oregon. It was owned by LaSalle, and then now owned by Pebblebrook.
Wow.
And they have developed, I think they've got about 6 or 7 tree houses they did tacked on to their 200-room sort of resort there. And it was such a success that they had an 18-hole golf course. They changed that, took 9 holes out, made it a 9-hole executive course. And with the other great land that they had for this golf course, they've been adding more and more tree houses. And when I was at AutoCamp, they thought about maybe putting in a bunch of Airstreams as well. But yeah, the treehouse thing is, again, done right and to commercial standard, right? You have to have it so it's got all the fire and life safety and all the mod cons that you need in a 5-star or 4-star hotel room. It's not cheap when you want to throw that up into the trees. So it's
Yeah,
expensive.
we
Hey,
did
you
a
beat me to
show.
it.
We did a
I
show
saw
in
some images of what he's
uh,
talking about.
I did a show in Peru or Chile or someplace,
Yeah.
and the gentleman who invented Tiger Woods Golf or created Tiger Woods Golf, he wanted to really bring something different. His first thing, I said, "What was your first challenge?" He said, "Getting clean water to my employees." He said, "Before I can hire anyone, I had to make sure their place, their environment, their town was safe. They had places to live, they had drinking water." And then they started building this place. And this place was the closest thing to a 5-star treehouse I've ever seen. And everything, every bridge I climbed over and every treehouse I went into was like just state of the art, unbelievable, well built. Hurricanes aren't taking that treehouse out or those tree houses out. It was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, that's a great point you brought up, Glenn. Getting back to your
Yeah.
question around the naming and how it's really hard to kind of pinpoint a name right now on it, but there is commonalities, and the commonalities in terms of, like I said, the place that I'm working in is they're usually remote locations, and that's a commonality. Typically detached units, but they all have, because they're remote and then out there in nature, Mother Nature kicks them in the guts about every 3 or 4 months. They have to deal with that. And labor is either scarce, or workforce housing is also scarce, to the point Anthony was just making. So that's a commonality that they all have to deal with. And the clean water issue brings you to the utilities. They all have issues with utilities, and the speed bump or the brakes on this sector are, one, zoning. You get a lot of these places very sensitive. People don't want a lot of new activity, new traffic. There's not enough employees, and environment. So you really have to make sure you can get water, and that's a restrictor in some environments.
Right.
You have to be able to deal with sewage, septic systems. That can be a restrictor in certain areas.
Yeah.
Power is, usually you can get the power, but trying to get off grid and really supplementing with solar or whatever you can do is still a bit of a challenge when you're dealing with a commercial enterprise, right? You have to have at least emergency generator if you got, again, fire and life safety issues and stuff like that. So those utility issues are a similarity across the sector.
Two things. One, I want to ask you about accessibility, but also, handicap accessibility, but also I went to Belize, I believe, on one of our shoots, and Francis Ford Coppola has a really nice resort there, but they really try to stay off the power grid, and it's 117 degrees with no air conditioning, no fan, no anything. And my director had to literally take 7 showers. I didn't sleep at all. And all I did was sweat the entire time I tried to sleep. And that was not comfortable. And if I was paying $1,500 a night for that, I might as well just pitch a tent and go in my backyard. I was wanting some level of comfort.
Yeah. And that brings up a great point. I'll speak to that in 2 ways. One, around the utility issue and how you do that, particularly with a tent, which doesn't hold heat, and it doesn't hold the cold air very well either. So how do you air condition that? One of the things I love about this sector, again, about 20, 25 years ago, there's all these new entrants into the lifestyle sector, whether it was Chip Connolly and Barry came in and kind of, blew it out. And you're seeing a lot of these new entrants into the market that haven't really been in hospitality before, and they're kind of figuring it out. Peter Mack from Collective Retreats out at that Governor's Island property, he came up with a really innovative way to put a split unit aircon inside the tent, and you can't even see it's there. It doesn't upset the aesthetic, and yet you do get that air conditioning in there. And then AutoCamp did a great job, to your point, around accessibility. It's hard when you're out in the dirt and the gravel to get a wheelchair around. So there's requirements around that when you get up over a certain number of units, and you have to comply. Obviously, certain states are more strict than others. But AutoCamp did a great job of leaning into it and not making it a bad thing, but making it a great thing. So they came up with
the Belize property for those of you
that's
watching.
very cool.
Yeah, go on, Todd.
So what they did was they came up with an accessible suite, but they called it an X suite. So it's X Suite, which kind of looks like X Games, but it's X Suite, but it stands for accessible suite. They're right close to the clubhouse. There's a paved walkway to either way. There's a discreet but compliant ramp that gets you to the unit, and the unit is gorgeous. It's not an Airstream, because Airstreams don't really work really well with wheelchairs, but
Right.
it's a kind of a tiny home kind of thing,
Mhm.
and beautiful, so beautiful that what you find is that where people kind of tend to stay away from the accessible unit in a hotel or whatever, they don't want that look and feel. Here, people flock to it. It'll go before other units sometimes,
Wow.
because people know
Now,
it's
was
a
that
beautiful,
something
beautiful unit.
mandated? Was that mandated, or is it something they wanted to do?
No, totally. They had to do an accessible unit. Yep. Yep. I think they had to do 3. They had 400 units. You know, the hard part in this sector, though, is complying with the next level of the accessibility, which is you have to do an accessible unit in every type of the other things you have. So that makes it tough for some units. So you have to go and
Right.
kind of plead the case that, look, I'm not going to be able to get a wheelchair up into a treehouse. So
Yeah,
that
it's
might be
interesting
difficult.
because it's so important that, a lot of owners and a lot of us are basically legally responsible for making sure that we have accessibility, which is if a lot of companies weren't forced to do it, they wouldn't do it, and that would be a shame. On the other hand, you can't have an accessible room for every single room type you have, because you can't build it sometimes, and it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. I mean, even with the accessible wheelchair into the pool, it was great to see it. But I remember seeing one hotel where it was down. It was where no one will ever be able to get to. I could barely get to it, and then they had the accessible lift for the pool. I was like, no one's ever getting down there because it's already been grandfathered in, but the lift wasn't. So sometimes it gets a little confusing. But all in all, sometimes you have to mandate things, or it won't get done, and it's not fair. Listen, I have a good friend of mine who, at 16 years old, became he's in a wheelchair his whole life, and when he travels, it's really difficult for him to get on a bed.
Yeah, that's true. They're actually, to that point, there's a great new property in Moab called the Hoodoo, and they leaned into it, and they made their pool have a compliant grade ramp that is in the pool. So you come from the outside and you
Awesome.
ramp
Wow.
into the pool, and it just, I mean, everybody loves it because it, kind of lets you have a gradual entry
Glenn,
yourself.
Glenn, who do you think built it?
Yeah.
Get it? Voodoo?
Well, yeah, we'll put that one on the list of.
Don't you have a drum beat for that? Ding. Don't you have one?
Boom, boom, tish.
Did you get that? Hold on. Let's do it again.
There
Anyway,
you
now I totally lost the train of thought. But yeah, that actually reminds me of the zero entry pools. A lot of resorts have that, so it works great. So for people that need the accessible accommodation could go in there. But also, what I liked about it is when I had toddlers, they could sit in there, and it was just really good for all ages, and it created more of a resorty type of feel to me. Why are you giggling there, over Anthony?
Just to the audience, those toddlers, those were his children.
Yeah. But I had children that were toddler sized, that makes that makes sense.
So it must be like, Todd, you've been in this industry for a long time. How'd you start your career? And like, this must be a really cool thing for you to do, like, because it's completely out of what we do really every day, but it's the same thing. And it's such a niche consulting opportunity, because like we just talked about, power grids, permits, it's like if people can save a lot of money talking to you. I always say, talk to the experts and spend a little bit of money before you bring them in when you have to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks. You can say that at every show. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
And all my consulting partners would like that too.
Yeah.
But look, I started out in market analysis. My thesis, getting my MBA, was on the.
Oh, you're a boring guy. All right, you're a boring guy. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I didn't think of myself that way, but maybe I was.
Oh, now you should.
Now exposed.
It's been declared.
Exposed.
Yeah.
But I did my thesis on the changes in the hotel industry in the 1980s, when it was all the CEOs of the big companies were food and beverage guys that graduated from Lucerne in Switzerland, and then it switched to retail CEOs, and then you saw the segmentation in the marketplace and all the different sectors that evolved over time, which I thought that was fascinating. So just always loved business analysis. I went to work for Laventhal and Horwath in the late 80s, when there was the big 8 accounting firms, and they were number 9, and I did a lot of consulting in California, Mexico. Went over to Hong Kong and worked for Horwath there for a couple of years. And then I was the third guy at Marriott over there, still doing analysis on the different markets, and eventually Singapore, then down to Australia. Worked there for about 13 years. Did the Westin in Sydney and the W,
Nice.
which was got me into the lifestyle sector.
Yeah.
It was the easiest thing I ever did was putting a Westin a W hotel on the water in Sydney before the Olympics. And then really, growing brands through my career and all the way up to the sale of Two Roads and growing that portfolio and those brands. And kind of reached a point in my career where I want to do the things I want to do, and
it seems like it matches your lifestyle, right? Because
Yeah,
you live in Bend, Oregon. You spend a lot of time doing these kinds of things.
Yeah. I'm a big fly fisherman, and I love the outdoors. I've been camping and fishing for most of my life wherever I could when it was right. I mean, raising a family, that makes it a little more difficult sometimes. But anyway, so when I saw this sector emerging and kind of getting more institutional, I really wanted to make sure that I was there to kind of help it along. It seemed like the lifestyle boutique independent sector just took so long to get the institutional backing and the funding that all these people needed. And these people need that right now too, particularly the brands that are trying to scale. Because at the end of the day, it's a more approachable way for nature, right? You guys don't want to sleep on the ground, but you will sleep in a 1,000 thread count bed and have mimosa in the morning, and you can do all that when you're glamping. So it's very approachable. It's at all the different price points, right? It doesn't have to be the $1,000 a night. It can be $200 or $150. And with these guys coming in with the Lodge and the Field and Stream brands, it's going to be even more approachable. So I think that's great, and the bigger why for me is getting kids off of these, getting around a campfire. And like I say, actually there's a bit of a why in the road as well in terms of where the industry is going. There's one direction is towards a wellness approach. The Getaway brand, which I think Barry's invested in that as well. The Getaway brand, they promise you're going to be 2 hours from your boring apartment in the city. You're going to be in nature. You're going to commune with your loved one that you might be with and nature. And that's it. They don't really have a check-in or any kind of a central facility. And they really promote that you go there for wellness. You go there to let your cells expand, get out in nature. It's important to you. It gets you off of this and lets you to deconnect and do a digital detox. That's one way the industry is going. And there's a couple of brands that are working down that avenue, which I think is great. And that's a good thing. But then there's another avenue, which is, no, you're going to come there and you're going to commune with nature. You're going to commune with your loved ones, but you're going to go by a communal campfire and you're going to talk to people that don't look like you. And you're going to talk to people that aren't from your same economic background or whatever. And you're all going to have the commonality that, where did you go hiking today? Which mountain bike did you take? What did you do? And you're going to talk about a million other things, not politics, not controversial issues, but the fact that you're in this amazing, beautiful place. One of my sayings is that the glow of a campfire emphasizes all our commonalities, and the heat from the campfire melts away all our differences. And so that group of brands that are going down that road, I think, is great. And they're designing the properties, and I've been helping out with this as well in terms of creating those uncomfortable moments. Yeah, you do have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. You do have to go down a path. We'll light it. No problem with some solar lighting. But you might run into some nature, and you might run into somebody else that happens to be doing the same thing. And that's important.
What's interesting? We're not so far removed from our ancestors that lived like this and survived this way. And we've gotten so comfortable and made everything so easy for ourselves that this seems unique when really everyone is living like this up until 3 seconds ago.
Yeah. And the other thing is
the iPhone, the iPhone was invented in 15 years ago?
Yeah.
So it seems like it's been around forever. So what we're doing is just going back to what our ancestors did and kind of how we're built. We're built this way.
Yeah, very much so. And the other interesting thing about the sector, which I really like, is that you're finding that the labor demographic is a little bit unique in that you get kids that are either, in their 20s, maybe they're out of college, maybe they're out of high school or whatever, working there. But then you also get people in their 50s and 60s that are like, I don't really need the big paycheck. I want to relax a little bit. I'm going to go back into hospitality, or I'm going to go help these people. And, there's a lot of people out there that are just born to be in the service industry. And a lot of these entrepreneurs that are starting these properties across the country, they have the heart of an innkeeper, and they bring that to this sector, which is really great. That's on a smaller level, but they're everywhere.
Yeah, and one of the things you realize, I realized with my children, when you get them off the grid and you get them just around the family and you get them, we go to a place up in the Catskills, like they don't really go to their phone. My daughter now commutes into the city. She's a event planner, and she reads books. She's off her phone all the way into the city, which is an hour and a half commute. And she sits on the bus and she reads books. She's read 6 books in January. She didn't read 6 books since she's, born. And she read 6 books, and I think she read 25 last year. So kids and people, yes, if it's in front of you and they're bored, they'll use it. But if you give them a reason to connect, everybody wants to connect.
Yeah.
Unless you're Glenn, then you go in the woods by yourself.
Well, I kind of like it that way. Plus, it's less offensive to other people.
Only child syndrome.
Yeah. So, Todd, so you had mentioned that some of these tents could be as much as building a regular hotel room. What about some of the other fixed expenses, labor and all of that kind of stuff, ongoing maintenance? How is that similar or different than to what the typical hotel investor is experiencing in their careers?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first thing is that you're working horizontally, and so your infrastructure isn't just a boiler room and pipes going straight up and off that. You've got to go out horizontally out into the land. So that's one little difference in terms of the design and the makeup. And the other things are whether you're going to have that guest check-in area, clubhouse or whatever. And those can be very expensive. You look at some of the auto camp ones, they've got a great design aesthetic. It's sort of mid-century modern meets, mountain modern kind of thing. But it's a clean line, a lot of communal workspace, communal seating space inside and outside. So you're finding that the cost can be very similar to a normal hotel. It's just configured a little differently because all your buildings are separate. And that's kind of a key part of it when you're camping. I mean, you want to have a little bit of space. If you're in a tent, you hear everything. So you really want to have some space between you. So there's a dynamic in the market around how many units you put per acre. And it's as small as 0.5 acre. If you look at the getaway model, they'll
now we're
put
looking at auto camp.
Oh yeah, see, there's the clubhouse. That's a good shot. I think that's Cape Cod. So there's there's a dynamic around how dense you want the property to be.
Right.
And some will do 1 unit every 2 acres, some of the brands, and some of the brands will get 6 or 7 units inside an acre. But you get up towards 10, 12. Now you're starting to look like an RV park, and you're a little bit close to each other. So I think that's one of the advantages of the sector, and one of the reasons why you're happy to pay a little bit more, because you get your own unit, and it's like having your own, bungalow or cottage at a high-end resort or something. That's only for the rich and famous in some places. So here you get it in every unit.
Have you ever done work in Iceland?
That's on my bucket list. I've been to 57 countries, not that one. And I'm dying to go now.
Because this seems, if you go to Iceland, when I went there, it was like, this is built for that place, because everywhere you look, it's the only place that I felt like I was on the beach. I was on Mars. I was at a ski resort, like in one setting. I didn't know where I was. There's actually video of me jumping around. It looks like I'm jumping around the moon. And there's like little places like this around. But if somebody came in, and maybe there's somebody there now doing this, it was like, it's the greatest place because it's small. It's just incredible for something like this. And the one country that I would live outdoors for my whole vacation would be Iceland.
Yeah. I don't blame you. I'm dying to go there. But that brings up a good point, which is when you talk about the accommodation type, and there's all different types. The way I come a big step back, and I'm like, what is your environment like? Are you going to be open only during the summer? Okay, then maybe you can do tents in your place. But if you want to be year round and you got 18 feet of snow coming in, in Tahoe or something like that, and you want to go year round, you're going to have to have a hard-sided unit, something that can be durable for the weather, heat, cold, all these things. These really should be the drivers to what type of accommodation you grab, because believe me, whether it's a tent or a tiny home or whatever, when you're in the great outdoors like that, you're going to get that Instagram picture. You're going to have the fire down in front of your little place, and it'll be fine. It doesn't really have to be one or the other.
We've done ice hotels in 3 or 4 different countries.
That's so
And the original ice hotel we did, I believe, was in Finland or Sweden, and they all have warm rooms. They all have places where you can go and eat and be comfortable or sleep, where it's more comfortable for you. And one hotel only lets you stay there one night because it is, I loved it. It's kind of the temperature I love. But have you done ice hotels? Have you done consulting on ice hotels? Have you ever been to an ice hotel?
No and no, but and I'm jealous that you got to do that, because I've seen the pictures and it always blows me away. And being the hotel geek that I am, I always want to figure out how are they doing this. I want to really know what they did was in the one that I went to in, I believe it was Sweden, I can't remember.
It melts. So what they do is they take all the chunks of ice out of the lake, and I was there when they were doing it. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. There's pictures of me, if Suzanne maybe can find it, on a big chunk of ice, and they cut these big bricks. Basically, it's probably the size of a small car, and they put it in a freezer, in a big freezer, and then when it melts, they get an architect and designer to design the new hotel. So every year you have a brand new hotel with new. I think they did one with Harry Potter. They did a whole theme of Harry Potter, and it's cool. I mean, I slept like a baby.
Yeah. I might have been, there might have been some subconscious not wanting to do it, because I went for my polar bear badge when I was a Boy Scout, had to sleep outside in the snow and dig a hole for the tent and all that stuff. And they told you have to take all your clothes because they're all moist, and then get dry clothes on before you go to bed. There's no way I'm taking off all my clothes in this tent. Not going to happen. Froze all night long. I remember to this day.
Well, what was so funny was, as soon as I went to lay down, the gentleman took my water bottle away. And I said, "Why are you taking my water bottle away? I can't sleep without my water bottle." And he said, "Do you want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and walk a quarter mile to go to the bathroom?" I was like, "Take my water bottle."
Exactly.
That sounds hysterical. So before we wrap up, Todd, you had mentioned that a great demand driver was outside national parks, right? But where are some of the other places people? Oh, there's that picture of Anthony standing the ice.
No, that's very cool.
That's really cool.
That was the coolest shoot I've ever done, because I actually see them cutting, and that's me going to sleep. In the other picture, I was about to go to sleep in the ice hotel, and as long as you have the right blanket stuff, and there's me eating in the ice hotel, it was cool. It was one of the coolest things. I don't know. I don't mean to keep hijacking it, but sorry.
It's great. No, it's really cool. I'm super jealous of all these experiences.
It is cool.
Yeah. I mean, really, really, really cool. So, Todd, but the last thing I wanted to talk about, what was it that I was saying, guys? I'm totally blanking on what I was just talking about before we did the ice. Oh, well, I'll just,
was it around where the industry's going?
Yeah. No, not where the industry's going, but where should people be looking for opportunities outside gateway to national parks and stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. So the priority for a lot of these brands that are coming out, a lot of the companies that are developing, are to be outside of a national park, because it's such a constant and clear demand generator. But there's other places that are popping up that are really working well also. So state parks, a lot of states in the country have amazing state parks, and working around those can work. Beaches, wine districts can provide great opportunities for outdoor hospitality. And an interesting thing on that is, a couple of my clients now, which I didn't see this coming, farms. So farms are looking for other ways to generate revenue. There's a company called Sagra Farms, and they actually will buy or operate an existing farm, and they have a mission to teach people and expose people to regenerative farming, and they'll run events, weddings, meetings, things like that, and a handful of small amount of accommodation as well. So farms have been a great place for this sector, and also wineries. What they say about the wine industry: if you want to make $1 million in wine, start with 2. And so a lot of them are struggling, from this year to that year on making money as a winery. And so, but they do great weddings. They have these great weddings, but all the accommodation revenue is leaking out to the local markets and cities and things like that. So they're looking to bringing in accommodation, and they can through typically, not typically, but in a lot of places, there's an agritourism exemption. And if you're doing agritourism, then you can get those units in there and all the infrastructure that's required to run it. So you really capture some of the revenue.
That's interesting. Because Todd, I'm thinking, and Anthony, we live out, east. He lives in New York City. I live east of New York City. But if you go further out, we have wine country in the North Fork of Long Island, and a lot of these wineries, they all have places where you can go for tasting and eat charcuterie. They'll have music on Saturdays and Sundays. How cool would that be to then be able to have some of these high-end tents or tree houses or some other accommodations that really enmesh you in that Eastern Long Island culture, for example? So I love how you said wineries have a good opportunity there as well.
They do. And, there's been companies out there. There's a good one in California called Shelter & Co. And they've got about 600 glamping tents in stock, and they can send them with the furniture, with the bedding. They'll do the check-in, the checkout for, on a pop-up basis, on these wineries or wherever you might want to have your event. And so people that are holding these events are like, why don't we just have these here all the time and, run it all summer, all through the year.
So Todd, I'm going to assume here that you get calls from people that get into this space and they're in over their head and they're about to drown, and then they call you, and then you say to yourself, why didn't you? How can you start this without talking to an expert? Does that happen to you, Todd?
Yes. In fact, one of the quotes I said was like, if someone gave you $3 million and you had to build a ship to bring you from New York to London, would you just start building it, or might you call somebody that's built one of these ships before?
I'd watch the videos on YouTube.
I'd probably call Glenn. Who do you know that builds ships?
Because that's kind of the stakes. Some of so there's two things. One, I tell people, if you're going to do less than 20 units, it's a lifestyle. So if the cleaner doesn't want to come, you're cleaning it. If the chef doesn't want to come, you're cooking it. So under 20 is a lifestyle, and over 20 is kind of a business. And so then you might want to bring in a professional manager or hire somebody to manage for you. And so that's kind of one of the lines of demarcation. And then, a lot of people, when I tell them that, they don't hire me because they go, oh, wow, I don't want that lifestyle. Okay, we'll do something else. So that happens. But,
well, when people tell me they want bed and breakfast, back in the day, we would say bed and breakfast, not Airbnb. Yeah. And they want bed and breakfast. I said, yeah, we're going to retire and we want to kind of kick back and just get it. So basically you want to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Okay, good. Have fun. It's like, it's easy. It's only 8 rooms. It's easier to run. People don't understand this. It is easier to run a 170-room hotel than it is to run 8 rooms, because 8 rooms, like you said, it's a lifestyle, and you're cleaning people's toilet bowls. When you have 170 rooms, you have enough revenue to have somebody else clean somebody else's toilet bowl.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's part of the industry right now. It's sort of, there's a lot of mom and pops, people throwing up, a couple of tents out in the back or some tiny homes and putting on Airbnb or Hip Camp, put a campfire out there. And that's happening all over the country at a great extent. It's, when they start, okay, we're going to really invest in this. We're going to put $3, $5, $10 million in this, then hopefully they're calling me.
Yeah, and my favorite's when they say, they damaged my room, or they damaged my tent. Really? A hotel guest damaged your room?
I've never heard of that before. It's really unusual.
No, but if you get right side, you get to a new person, whether it be in what you do now or hotels, and they're like, people damage my rooms. It's like, yeah, it's called CapEx.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's that 4% line on the P&L. That's right. Which we all know is like 8, but you put the 4 in there.
And they stole my bathrobe. My own sister-in-law stole the bathrobe on her honeymoon, the hotel I hooked her up at. She goes, these were free, right? I go, yeah, they're free for $150.
All right, Todd, how can we learn more about what you do and how to find you?
So Horwath HTL, and look under the outdoor hospitality practice on the website. Yep.
Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for being here and elucidating us on this incredible industry. Now I want to go and start my own glamping operation here at the Houseman Resort Pool Club Smokehouse and hopefully soon to be brewery. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Honored to be here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. And you forgot podcast studio that you're saying.
Oh, yeah, and podcast studio as well. Anthony, any final words before we get out of here for the week?
Yes, please don't ever talk to me about your cats and your new cat machine that you use, because every single day I get 26 advertisements for that machine that you bought for your cats.
Serious?
Dude, every day, emails, social media. I've never looked for it. I just talked to you about it, and all of a sudden, I'm a cat lover.
The automated litter box really works well. Sorry to, but if you do have cats, it is helpful. I promise not to talk about that anymore, but I will not, Anthony, stop talking about how you could download our shows on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you get your shows, we are there. And of course, if you're listening to us right now, you want to see some of those images that we were talking about today, feel free to check us out on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. And of course, all shows are housed at novacancynews.com. Anyway, thanks so much for being here. And remember, everybody, you've got one life, so blaze on and
Be kind to yourself.
see you all next week and tomorrow night on Friday Night On at 5 p.m.